Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch of Monarch Astrology. I'm sitting down to make a video and do something that I've never done before, which is to sit down with my chart and share some personal experiences and relate it back to my chart. And the reason that I want to do this is because I want to just share a window into what it's like to build a understanding of yourself through the language of astrology and combining your life experience with astrology. So the experience that I have is that studying astrology deepens my perception. So I notice more things, but also I come into this life with a certain gift of perception, I would say. And I would say that's in my chart too. And before it was astrology, it was writing, it was literary analysis, just noticing things at such a deep level. And so my life experiences and my conversations with people are always informing my astrology, and my astrology informs my relationship with life. And it has gotten to a place too where I just can translate things. Like if I'm having a conversation with someone and we're not talking about astrology, at some level, my mind is registering the archetypes. I might be, totally and completely present. It's not that I'm in my head thinking about something else, but I may be getting a feeling or, just feeling Saturn or feeling Taurus or feeling the transit that's happening, and so that's always part of my mental cognitive register. And I just want to model kind of like what that can do in terms of personal narrative, meaning making, soul making, and whatnot. So I'm going to reveal the chart. This is my natal chart. So I sat down to write something. It was just a thought that came through. It was a memory and just kind of, how I was piecing together that, meaning around the memory, when it occurred to me that this was really a good example of some things in my chart. So let's see. One of the things that I had wanted to talk about, and we'll probably talk about at a different time, is that my nodes in Cancer and Capricorn are squared by a Mercury-Venus conjunction in the first house in late Pisces. And this chart signature has been something that I've been working with, investigating through my direct experience and kind of working with the tensions of that T-square of this very karmic kind of evolutionary impasse. I specialize in planets squaring the nodes in chart readings, and I've been very aware of mine and working with it. So I may bring in some of that, but it requires, I think, some setup of explaining what that signature means. But let me just launch into the story, and I'll kind of weave our way into the chart. So what I was thinking about was how back when Monarch Astrology was a Tumblr blog, not even a website yet, so we're looking at like 2014, I had these two really good friends. And, I considered them kind of like my best friends at the time. And my astrology practice, I had just studied astrology formally, and was building my kind of daily practice with astrology in terms of just thinking about it every day and like writing things and making posts, right? And then I also was writing a novel. And during this creative process, so maybe we're kind of in like 2013 at this point in the story. Basically, these Mormon missionaries came to my door, and studying astrology put me in this very experimental, playful kind of realm, because ordinarily I would not have considered inviting the missionaries in. If missionaries were knocking at the door, I'd probably be like, no, thanks, But I was really, having this fresh, deepened relationship with my natal chart. And you see here, Pluto's in the 9th house. And one of the ways that I had come to, understand or interpret that placement was that I had some kind of deep soul resonance or karmic resonance with like the missionary archetype, the cosmological person. And though I do not necessarily consider astrology a religion, I do consider it a worldview, right? It's a worldview that this earth is ensouled, that the planets are meaningful, right? That events here and our inner world correlates with the cosmos and like the movement of these celestial bodies. And it's a worldview, right? Like, I don't consider it something I like believe in, right? But I'm sure that, you know, in the realm of the ninth house, we're talking about too, like scientific materialism is a worldview. The church and like conventional mainstream religion is a worldview, right? So this house, the ninth house, relates to like how we contextualize the kind of cosmic or natural order in things. And that can be coming from a very social or socialized lens in terms of like organized religion. And it can be maybe more like nature-based in terms of earth-based spiritualities, or I think astrology kind of fits in that category. So one of the parts of ninth house Pluto is really wanting to be believed and having this kind of subconscious impulse or need to convince and convert others so that you feel secure, right? So that's something I've been pretty cognizant of since I began to study my natal chart. And before I had that awareness, I had gotten myself into trouble through my need to be believed, you know, saying things that maybe would have been better left unsaid, trying to argue my point in a non resonant situation, like things like this, right? So as I'm thinking about this and just having this deeper curiosity about the ninth house and the Sagittarius archetype, and Jupiter, like archetypes that have a kind of archetypal coherence in EA, in evolutionary astrology. Missionaries coming to my door felt like a perfect, you know, third house local, it's right at my door kind of opportunity to have a learning experience. So I invited the missionaries in and I proceeded to meet with them weekly for several months. And I was mind blown. I honestly had thought that I just kind of thought that people that are like following a kind of Judeo-Christian religion, like I didn't get it, you know, I didn't really grow up with a lot of like religious conditioning. And I'm Jewish, right? So I didn't really experience like the Christian experience. So some people have you know, like a kind of wounding around that where they've grown up with religion and they just want to get far away from it. But to me, it was a novelty of like, what do these Mormons have to say about reality, you know? And so I went into this experience with the intention to be curious, but not like I wasn't trying to, I'm just checking something. I wasn't trying to convert. I was felt pretty grounded in reincarnation-based astrology. But I learned a lot from the missionaries in terms of prayer and having a direct connection to God. We'd pray. One of the missionaries told me something about how when she like prays to like the you know, to Heavenly Father, and like there's the Trinity with the Holy Ghost and Jesus as well, like the Trinity became like a real experience to me, like almost in a polytheistic way, where it's like I was having an astrological experience and like engaging like the fairy realm, and also suddenly having this mystical experience with Jesus and the Holy Ghost and Heavenly Father. So, but I had no intention on, just because I was having a magical, mystical experience, being like, this is the one true way, I will now convert, right? But I went into it with curiosity and openness and all of this. So one thing that I just also think is funny from this experience was that the missionaries told me that if I didn't convert in this lifetime, that, you know, I would have an opportunity kind of like in purgatory to like continue to read the religious texts and like make a conversion, and then I could get into heaven. And from my perspective, I thought that these missionaries would keep reincarnating and working through their, emotional attachments to consensus religion until they outgrew it and like developed other forms of spirituality. So I thought it was really funny that from both of our cosmological perspectives, we had ways of telling stories about each other, about how essentially, my way of looking at the world is right. And as either you're in purgatory or you're reincarnating, you'll have the opportunity to see the way and to evolve, And so it just really gave me such pause and such a reflection of like, I really offer teachings about reincarnation and navigating life from a perspective of being on a multi-lifetime journey, not as like a definitive, this is the one true way and you must see it. Like, I personally don't care if my students believe in reincarnation or not, but just to have it as like a contemplative tool. Because from where I'm sitting, I really do believe in reincarnation. That's the reality that I feel cosmologically aligned with. And there's something about the spaciousness that opens up of like, this is not my only lifetime, so I have time to learn and figure certain things out. But also what I avoid or don't work through in this lifetime is just going to come up again. So it's given me a kind of spaciousness, and I wouldn't say urgency, but maybe motivation to like really like, figure some stuff out because I don't want to just put it off for another lifetime. Right. So back to the friends that I had at this time grew tired and disturbed of me, I would say, because I had become really excited about astrology and wanted to talk about it with them. And they were amenable to it. But the deeper I got into it, and I would like see one of my friends, be in some stuck pattern. And I'd be like, can't you see it's just this thing in your chart? And I'd like try to talk about it, which just made her pretty angry. And what else? Oh, the missionaries. I think that at first, maybe they thought it was cool or interesting or quirky or something that I had invited the Mormon missionaries in. But at some point, I think it also, like, they just weren't resonating with that and were disturbed at my enthusiasm and this new mystical experience I was having with the Holy Trinity and astrology and all of that all at once, right? So basically, these friends ghosted. They didn't, formally break up with me or something, but I found out later from one of them that the other thought I was too intense. And then that one who told me that also stopped talking to me. So from here, I had so many mixed emotions. So the Moon-Pluto opposition, I want to bring this in, where the Moon-Pluto opposition is pretty intense emotionally. It's a very like magnetic, but also repelling kind of lunar signature. There's like an emotional kind of frequency that is felt in the room. Like a person with Moon-Pluto, like their emotions can be felt by people around them. So in terms of like sharing a living space, it's like that moody person that like you feel the mood that is coming from them. And for me, Moon-Pluto, it's been a lot of battles with my own emotion and finding emotional empowerment and like having, I have a ton of like primal energy in my emotional body where it's like through my focus and through my passion, I'm able to like alchemize and like shift my reality. But I've also had times in my life where, the emotions felt unbearable or I felt like I was losing it. For those of you who know my story, like I did actually have a psychosis in the midst of a really profound spiritual emergence. I don't have any shame really about having a psychosis. To me, it literally was just, I was so open suddenly to so many things. My, inner content, this kind of permeability to spirit and to magic. And I just simply didn't have the internal architecture or the frameworks to hold that opening. So it turned into a psychosis. So I really have compassion around that. But Moon Pluto, it's like there can be fears of abandonment. Like definitely like the moon like has gone through some trials, and also has some kind of like potent kind of alchemical quality with that Moon Pluto axis. So if you know about Moon Pluto, some of this is very felt and familiar to you. Otherwise, I hope that was like suitable, and I'll keep weaving in things about it. But essentially, having my friends think that I'm too intense was like kind of like an ouch, Moon Pluto experience. And it was related to my cosmological pursuits, my astrology and all of that. And it's really interesting because the third house, is more, it's just more of like a local energy. It relates to your neighborhood, the local dialect, slang, like just kind of like being on the same page as other people. Whereas the ninth house is like you go pretty far out, you go to the mountain, you go to a monastery, you go to have a visionary experience, right? And the third house is a lot more congenial with like the speak, and like just being in touch. But at the same time, there's maybe a little bit of a lack of there's personal meaning in the third house, right? Like there's a sense of what things mean to you, or like an inside joke, or like what you share in common with the people around you. But that bigger picture, what happens when we die, what's the purpose of life, that's kind of the realm of the ninth house. And so in that moment, my friends that I was connected with were maybe kind of more in that third house space. Like they were mystical, they had some interest in these things, but they weren't as intense Pluto about it as I had become in that moment. But something interesting happened because this space, I remember, when I found out, because at first, the friends are ghosting and you don't know what's going on, but you have a sense, you're like, this isn't normal. They're not talking to me anymore. And I could feel, there were certain conversations we'd had where when I said my friend was angry when I was bringing in astrology, she didn't voice that anger. I could just feel it. And that kind of chasm, opened between us, right? So as it's kind of dawning on me of like, my friends have abandoned me, and simultaneously, I felt so deeply connected to the universe. I was having direct experiences of synchronicity. I was feeling the universe answer my prayers and talk back to me. So I may have lost my earthly friends, but I had friends in the sky, is what it felt like. But at this time, my body pulsed with anger. I felt betrayed, abandoned, and I decided that essentially around that time period, I'm going to befriend the whole world. Like, fuck this. If I have two friends who think that I'm too intense and too annoying because of my interests, why don't I just broadcast myself to the internet and diffuse my intensity? Maybe all this energy wasn't appropriate for two people. Maybe the degree of interest and investment and need to share my ideas with two people was way too much. And it was actually meant for an audience. And no wonder it felt like too much to these two people that were just in my environment. So that was a little bit of my logic there. And so we're looking at Moon Pluto relating to those themes of like abandonment and betrayal and kind of like emotional transformations, and having that occur on this axis that relates to belief systems, ninth house, higher vision, and third house, writing, publishing, sharing ideas, communicating. So part of why, I advocate for the internet, is that I've had a magical experience. I love it here. I absolutely love the internet. And I feel that people have different stories or different perspectives about what it means to share on the internet, what it means to be in the public, that, oh, people are fake on the internet, or people are so disconnected, but, digitally we're more connected than ever, but we're just on our like little isolated Black Mirror boxes and not really connecting. For me, it's actually been coming from a place of isolation and feeling alone geographically, but having a deep connection to my soul and to my spirituality, and trusting that if I were to broadcast my truth and my ideas and my perspectives out into the world, that I would find unknown friends. There was even like a Carl Jung quote that was like, no matter how isolated or lonely you feel, do your work truly and conscientiously, and unknown friends will come and find you. So my engagement with the internet has always been a prayerful practice of resonance, like getting in touch with people. And so that was an idea that really compelled me at the time. And I wasn't necessarily thinking about my Moon-Pluto at the time in this particular situation, but I definitely thought of it as a Mercury-Venus square the nodes, and resolved through the North Node, my ruler of the North Node, Saturn in Aquarius. And so the way that I contextualized the situation at the time was like shifting from one-on-one connections to relating to the collective as like a necessary developmental thing that my Venus Mercury needed. So that's a topic that I want to talk about at a different time, actually, because that's another can of worms. But back to kind of just this decision of like, okay, I'm going to befriend the internet instead. I found there was something to me, the way that I was contextualizing it at the time was like, I invested all this emotional energy into these two people who could just up and leave and decide they didn't like me after I thought we had something going, right? So in that kind of like hurt and that kind of like alchemical moment of like shifting my direction, I realized that the internet, like the internet and our nervous system are connected. Our nervous system is also connected with one-on-one relationships. But for me, in terms of having such a pulse of like looking at the bigger picture, being a philosopher and all of that, having relationships across the spaciousness of the internet and being related to many people is actually something that my nervous system really likes. I had an adjustment period in terms of when I first began to share my ideas and essentially out myself in the public as this like person with deep thoughts about reality. And I don't sound like my age. Like when you read my writing, there's I think there's this kind of ancient quality in my voice, and I don't say that from a place of like hubris or whatever. I see it when I read my writing. I'm like, that was like, I feel my Saturn, I feel like this crone energy that comes through. And so there's a vulnerability for me in that, and just putting that forth to the public and not just speaking as like a local space-time person, speaking like I sound my age and using, whatever third housey stuff. And I would feel insecure sometimes or exposed after I shared my writing, even if it wasn't about me. Like this capacity right now to sit with you and just talk about my chart is like a nervous system capacity that I think I've built up and that has taken time. And that's been like a steady, gentle progression process. But just, starting to share my writing, just coming out into the public as an astrologer was a nervous system activation where I would feel really anxious after I published things. And I would just be there with my thoughts, right? And I also have Pluto trine Mercury. So transformation around thoughts. And I realized that my anxieties were coming down to this sense of I will be killed for my words. Like I will be hunted. I will be excommunicated. I will be kicked out. It's not safe, right? Or like people won't like me. I will lose love. Like all those anxieties boiled down to those things. So I would give myself certain mantras, and I would just kind of soothe myself in that nervous system freak out until I started to feel better. And also, it would be like when people were liking and commenting on what I shared, it helped me regulate. So that's another critique that people have about the internet that I think is really kind of cold. This sense that like, oh, people who share things like they're just so hungry for validation. We're just a culture of likes and isolation and all of this. And actually putting my my truth and like being in my embodiment and pushing the edge of like my fears around being seen, and then receiving reflection from the community around me was really important in my development of my own like nervous system. And that includes too, like learning the skill of blocking people if they're trolling you, or knowing what your boundaries are in terms of if you're open for debate or not, not feeling like you have to defend yourself, like just kind of learning the martial arts of communication on the internet was really big. So here I was deciding to kind of connect with a larger, broader community at a little bit more of a distance, in terms of like, I'm sharing something deep from my soul, but it's not one-on-one relationship where we're hanging out in person per se. And just kind of thinking about Moon-Pluto in this, and just the last few days of like feeling into that, of like, the really interesting thing is that in this process, because I was analyzing my chart and sitting with this from a kind of like soulful metaphysical perspective, my theory, my great kind of prophecy for myself in my early 20s was that if I'm authentic online, if I show myself, if I share my writing, unknown friends will come and find me. And that's what's happened. I have friends all over the world who are astrologers or other kinds of healers, thinkers, philosophers, people that I have on Magic of the Spheres podcast, people that I see at conferences, friends, you know, like even just locally, if I meet someone and we're connecting and we share social media and they go look at my stuff, and then next time we hang out, they talk to me about it. Like there's something in that feels really intimate to me. I'm like so thankful that they read my writing and that they engaged with it. And there's a part of me that feels like closer to people because of that, that they engaged with my art or like my creativity. So even though the beginning of being on this individuation process and feeling a little bit alone, of like, my friends think I'm intense, they ditched me, fuck it, I'm just going to broadcast on the internet. The prayer behind that sharing had always been connection. So that's connection of so many different kinds. You know, I feel connected to my clients and my students, and everything that I share online is basically coming from this like desire to live a beautiful life, to be like generative, and to be in touch with something meaningful, and to share, and to be in deeper like communion, I suppose. But what I found really interesting in terms of like how this has kind of come full circle in some senses is that in the process of developing my voice as a writer, building my business, going really to that Capricorn North Node and being like, forget these personal, intimate connections that don't feel secure to me. And I'm going to feel powerless if I invest all this energy into this one person and they leave. You know, I was like, I'm going to build a network instead and get way more involved in community. What I've found from everything I've picked up and learned around the archetypes and around being in business and having good relationships in my business world, my business relationships, or working with coaches, because I also coach, so I get coached, is that a lot of what has come through for me as something that is one of my cutting edges of growth is now like, now that I have attracted a more resonant community, and I feel like the people I engage with, we have a kind of resonance in our worldview, or I feel seen and appreciated for my ideas as opposed to rejected for them, like in that experience with those two friends. Now it's like, well, what are the relationship skills? And I've been just really in this process of like I got to a place where in order to be who I wanted to be in the world and like have the life that I wanted, I had to learn how to be exposed on the internet, like how to share my ideas, how to be authentic and not be afraid of what people would think, you know, and it was okay if people came and went. It doesn't hurt or hit as badly as like knowing someone up close and personal and then deciding they don't like you and leaving, right? So I learned the architecture of like, I'm going to be myself in public and see who likes it and who comes to me. And if someone doesn't resonate with it, they can just not participate, right? Now in my personal relationships, I think that I've been coming back into integration of learning how to be increasingly honest in my one-to-one, just like personal life relationships, in that the nervous system sensation, just as I felt so much sensation coming up when I posted statuses on Facebook or shared, you know, came out into the world as an astrologer and was all just like nervous system in flames, I'm gonna die, all of this, and like really, you know, soothing that and integrating that. Now, when it comes to needing to say hard things or be honest in a moment that scares me, it's like that all over again. And being part of the online world has put me in contact with so many teachings and like coaches and communities that have literally taught me the skills around intimacy and creating better relationships. So it's coming back to that place after going on a little bit of a travel. So I hope that makes sense. What I'm basically saying is that after devoting kind of my life force and my energy toward building community and like getting my work out there and like developing a platform and a brand and all of that, that original moment of my friends ditched me because I'm too intense, coming back full circle to the intensity of one-to-one, you know, relationship. And all of this time, I've had relationships. It's not like I've been on a mountain broadcasting from a complete hermitage. But what I have come to see and learn is just as I tell people that on the internet, if you're not authentic, if you're kind of sharing a manicured version of yourself, you're not going to feel that connected to the internet because you're getting reflected back in your inauthenticity or in your hiding. So people can't see you at the deepest level and they can't engage with you. That teaching has come through like so deep for me. Like it's part of my internet world and being authentic here, but it's also part of like relationships of like addressing those moments of misunderstanding or disappointment or just those like little kind of psychic undercurrents that come up in relationship and addressing them and creating connection instead of splitting off in those places where there's non-resonance. So I wanted to say too, I think it's important how we tell stories. And based on my own life experience and the things that I've divined in my chart that I haven't even necessarily gotten into, part of my path, Capricorn North Node as fuck, has been, you know, wanting to be a member of society, wanting to be in the world in my own unique and weird way, like my own kind of sovereign, like magical, non-conventional way. And I've really resisted, like if I see a movie, for example, where the plot line is someone felt rejected in their early life and not fully seen, not loved enough. And so they decided that they wanted to become famous. But then when they're famous, they end up being an alcoholic and being a jerk to everyone, and they're still hollow and sad inside. Like that plot just annoys me so much because I think it's very simplistic. And I think that people put a lot of projections onto the pursuit of fame or the pursuit of a public life because it seems like it's just to fill a hole or to fill a void, where for me, the direct experience I've had with it is that I did experience some feelings of loneliness or alienation or feeling almost misplaced in my environment. Like I see things and I don't feel like other people are seeing them. I don't feel like I'm connecting exactly with my geographical location. And so for me, the pursuit of an audience or like having a platform or having a life in the public was this big aspiration to find greater connection and meaning and be on this kind of like fun hero's journey, like to have a goal or something to work toward. But then at various levels of getting somewhere with it in terms of experiencing success or having an audience or going to grad school or whatever it's then resting and relaxing into and receiving the nourishment that this whole path has been about. So deepening into connection and intimacy, which is what I've wanted all along on this path, even if at times where things felt cold and barren and I didn't have connection around in the way that I wanted, I would compartmentalize that, put my head down, work, write, figure out how to get to where I wanted to go. And it's been this kind of balancing process of like being ambitious, having a work ethic, being disciplined, and relaxing and enjoying and like receiving the fruits of life. So I think that, you know, thinking about how we tell stories, whether it's about our own desires, our own path, our own kind of nature, or just maybe just common projections of like, oh, someone who wants fame or someone who wants to get internet famous or build a platform online, like what we think that means about someone versus what it actually means on a personal level. And so for me, a lot of this has been learning how to balance a certain intensity of my own being, like that I have a lot of psychic sight and perspective, and that I learned early on with the help of my chart and my life experiences combined, that this form of sight I have was misplaced if it was only part of my local environment and my personal relationships, that it needed a much bigger space to share things like the forecast that I share, where I'm talking to the collective, but I'm not as much talking to one person in particular. So for me, having this kind of intense perception, third house, ninth house land, it's really been the need for publishing and sharing my writing with a broader group of people. But this has also been a path of learning how to take up space in the world and like really fill into my own essence and build a certain internal architecture of feeling authority in my own being to be who I am and to face being witnessed in who I am by others. You know, like personally, I'm not worried about people thinking I'm wacko because I like astrology. Like, I don't care if someone has that worldview or that perception, that's fine. Like it just kind of rolls off of me. At some point though, I think my nervous system would have had more of a agitated or anxious response to that. But, you know, just learning basically how to take up space online has then given me the frameworks to integrate that lesson or that kind of experience into how I'm carrying myself in the local third house world, you know, in my neighborhood, when I go out and meet people at parties. And essentially also because I have such a broad network of people to talk about astrology with, I feel really deeply satiated in that way. And I feel like I've learned the graces of not bringing up astrology in casual conversation with people in a way that is not welcomed or invited. So I will be honest with people about that I'm an astrologer, and I'm happy to talk to people about it. But if they're repelled by that, I don't push the conversation. And I think that when I was younger, I used to, because I had all this intensity of like knowledge and desire to share it. And so working with the internet has been a way to channel and diffuse that intensity in a more expansive container than like lasering into one person and reading their soul when they didn't ask for it, essentially. So another thing that I wanted to kind of close this out with is that something that I find really interesting in my client work and just talking with people is that I've noticed that there's like this interesting binary. It's not always a binary, but you have people that are very fulfilled in their romantic relationships and their personal one-on-one relationships. Like they have secure connections in their life, and they're scared of being in the public or charging money for their offerings or doing things that are basically kind of like the Aries Capricorn side of things, of like being that individual in the world, being in business, starting up your own thing, being in your authority out in public. But they have the Cancer Libra thing down, which is feeling close and connected and relationally, connected. Or you have people that are like really killing it in the world and on their personal development path and in business, but they struggle with relationships, or they're single and they'd like to be partnered. And I think, can't we have it all, you know? And I do know people who have both. And it's just interesting, like the way that I've worked with astrology as a personal development tool is just sitting with a question like that of like, in my being, I've always intrinsically wanted like a fairy tale romantic life and like true love and all of that. And part of the way that I've pursued that, you know, ended up leading me to this prophetic vision of my natal chart that led me to believe that if I had a life in the public, that I would meet and resonate with the people I needed to meet. And then, you know, love would work out. So that was kind of the premise I worked with. And it's come to a place where my dharma, the things that I write, you know, my public life, my creativity all matters so much to me, and is something that I would bring into partnership in some sense. Like it's not something that I would put into shadow in order to be in a partnership. And for that, it leads me to think about how dharma and like personal path relates and maybe sometimes contrasts with relationship. And so this is just where I'm at in the journey. I think that like one of the deepest things that I've been working with is just greater authenticity in my connections that I've learned from the freedom that I feel out in the world. And it's a really fulfilling path. There's a lot of learning, and there's a lot of delayering. There's a lot of like vulnerability work that comes through that. And I'm excited for where it's going to go. But there was something I was trying to piece together here. I think that we're in a cultural moment that in the field of like personal development and coaching and whatnot, there's a really great interest in like living our best life. And I think astrology is an amazing tool for self-actualization. It's a map, you know, of our personal promise, so to say. And you'll have different relationships with your chart if you study it, if you live alongside of it over time and over the years. And I think that one way that I've had, you know, that I've worked with life, given this kind of Capricorn nature that I have going on, is I've always had this capacity to compartmentalize. And if one part of my life wasn't working, I would just kind of give life force energy to the thing that was, and eventually also transplant that energy of the thing that is working and let it fertilize the rest of my life. And I think that when we work with our natal charts and like tell stories and like get to know ourselves with our chart, we can account for how far we've come. We can account for what we've learned in life. We can look for messages about how we can move closer to the things that we desire or aspire toward. And there's this idea that there's a gestalt, like there's a greater kind of theme of our wholeness, right? And the gestalt will seek to complete itself, that as we move toward the path in life, we become more and more whole, right? If we're leaning into life and leaning into ourselves and delayering and deconditioning and aspiring and just being on this kind of personal development path wholeness is part of what's happening, and also experiencing these kind of diverse or contradicting parts of ourselves too. Like those can all coexist at the same time. But I just think it's really important, if you're looking at your life from a kind of narrative lens and using astrology as a tool, to be able to consider how, your path has taken you in a certain direction, what you've learned, how you can then work with what you've learned and carry it into other areas of your life. So I think I may just stop there because I can feel myself getting into like a little bit of a rambly space with it. But if you've been listening, I really appreciate you tuning into this with me and just letting me kind of like show and tell, like share some life experiences in my chart and how I've been working with it. If you have any thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments. Let me know how you resonated. If you've worked with similar chart signatures, just whatever you feel like sharing, I would love to hear. Thank you so much.